Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Now, I'm delighted to be joined again today by my first ever return guest on my podcast, Robert Annis. So Robert, would you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. And I am proud to be the first returning. Well, I didn't know that.
There you are.
Rather fantastic. But yes, hello, everyone. I am an organizational psychologist. I work with organizations to help them become more successful in what they do, in much the same way as a clinical psychologist works with an individual to say, how are you doing? You can eat and you can walk, but what's actually going on between your ears? I do the same with companies. Most companies are very good at delivering their products or their services, but not so good at actually being companies. It's my job to help them figure that out.
Great. Thanks for that. So I mentioned that you're returning. So the first time that Robert and I featured on this podcast, that was episode 27, in case anybody's thinking, where is it? I want to go and have a look. And what we talked about then was autism and the workplace. And we covered quite a lot of different things. We covered, for example, different expectations that we need to have in our workplaces with Gen Z coming through, the changes that they're driving, how leaders really need to get ready for Gen Z to keep their organizations thriving. Change of mindset to start developing the leaders of the future and not just stick to the kind of old ways of leading. So we talked about a lot of things. And another thing that we talked about was the importance of balance when we look at the skills that neurodivergent people, and specifically autistic people, bring to the workplace. So one point that you made really clearly, Robert, in that episode was that, yes, it's good to look at the positives, the skills that an autistic person can bring to a team and to an organization, but you have to balance it also with the challenges that that person experience as well, so that we get a balanced view and we can enable that person most effectively. So we're not going to talk about balance in that way today, but I think it's fair to say we're intending to build on that theme a bit.
It is such an important area.
Yeah, it's very, very important, and I've thought a lot about it since you raised that point in that last episode. What we're going to try and do today for those listening is take a look at the very kind of traditional, typical ways that people think of autistic skills fitting into an organization, but also take a look at the novel, more surprising roles or ways that autistic skills can also fit into an organization. And we're going to try to find some generalizations and try to share some tips of what the autistic person themselves and their team members and their team lead can do to help things to go smoothly. There we go.
Sounds easy.
That
that all sounds dead easy.
That was what we said.
A nice size bit of scope. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So hopefully you're not sweating too much, Robert, now. So let's start with the stereotype. So if you think about an autistic person in the workplace, do you think there's a stereotype in terms of the type of role that people think that they would fit in? And if so, what kind of role do you think it would be?
I would say no, I don't think it's a stereotype. I know it's a stereotype, right? Whether it's from lived experience or just my psychological understanding of human beings. The way that our brains work, we tend to typecast everyone we meet, just for ease and for safety, right? You want to, when you meet somebody, find out immediately, are they someone safe to be around, or are they quote unquote dangerous? And we see that as being different, right? So if someone's different, the first thought is, ooh, what's going on here, right? We're a bit more wary. And certainly autism is one of those things that falls into that category. People would act differently. And so people who are neurodiverse have learned skills. We tend to call that masking, right? That ability to fit in with society rather than stand out. And that's not an unusual thing. Most people know this. Anyone who isn't sort of part of the standard view of white male leadership will do some sort of fitting in, right? We all know we need to be part of society. And I think for autism, it's a particularly interesting one because we tend to write autism as if it's two things. One, it's understood, which it isn't. We know practically nothing about it. And two, that it is one thing, that the word autism means certain characteristics. It doesn't really. From a diagnostic point of view, for a psychologist to actually diagnose you, it's not any better than just asking some questions. I know we talked about this last time, but that means that whoever comes into that business They may be like the typical Rain Man version that people think of, or they may be incredibly creative. They may be incredibly quiet, incredibly loud. There isn't really a type. And so we can't really build an organization for autism. It's all about the individuals. And I think that's where it gets really tricky, that it isn't as easy as saying, if they have X or Y, then they'll be satisfied and comfortable. It's going to be different for each individual.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think what do I want to say? I mean, if you look at the studies that are published from the organizations that really led the way in building the organization into an autism-friendly, autism-enabling organizations, that's big tech organizations like SAP and Microsoft and so on, they invariably emphasize the variety of roles that autistic people end up in once they've kind of gone through their hiring and onboarding and mentoring program, and it's so invariably emphasized that you can't help but get the impression that it's a surprise. I mean, I know they're all tech companies that are recruiting, that are backing these programs, so you might expect that autistic people would end up in tech roles. We also know, for example, there's a very high concentration of autistic people in Silicon Valley because there's like a natural match of the skills that autistic people tend to have with what you need for tech roles. But yeah, autistic people end up all over the place, and that was one of the big discoveries, I think, of those autism at work programs. Have you got? I mean,
some examples? Yeah, I think you are hitting the nail right on the head with there's a surprise. Right, I think most organizations approach it in a kind of values-based, sort of moral, ethical, we know it would look good if we brought in these sort of people, right? And then they are surprised to go, oh, wow, actually, they can be really, really useful. And this is a great shameless plug that I'm going to throw in now, but how do I not? My wife and I started a charity called Neuro. It's neurocharity.org if you want to go and have a look. But the whole focus of it is exactly this, is of saying that just because these people are different, it doesn't mean you should look at them negatively. They're just different, right? And we tend to build organizations into sort of echo chambers. And so that lack of diversity of thinking means you get a lack of diversity of ideas and innovation, things like that. So companies can move quite slowly. So then when you get introduced and these companies introduced to neurodiverse people, it can be a shock, it can be a surprise as to what they can bring in. But some organizations have really got their heads around this. One of the most famous would be GCHQ, right, which is the communications center in Britain, and they are sort of the intelligence gathering part of the British government, right? And what they do is they recognize that people with these types of brains are able to do certain things better in different ways. They're able to concentrate for longer hours. They can dive much deeper into topics without getting bored. They can be very, very experimental in thinking. They are less guided by previous experiences. They're more willing to try new things. All of those things are great for code breaking, for getting into these sort of investigations the intelligence services get into. MI5, MI6, the same. The NSA in the US, same sort of approach. So they're finding real uses. So it's not purely a moral, ethical thing. There's a real understanding of these people can be really, really valuable. And I think that's a cultural shift for us, because generally speaking, in organizational psychology, where my background is, these are the sorts of people that would be good in business or be good in certain organizations, right? So you seek them out. Right, and those types of people are sort of the typecast of what you'd expect.
Yeah.
But that means people are left out. We're missing out on that diversity as we chase that focus. So certainly there's the risk that these organizations get so used to just regurgitating the same sort of people over and over again, and the HR processes are just, we're going to find the same people again and again, that they limit themselves in their growth potential. And there's such an opportunity there, both the organizations and for all these people that, you know, could do amazing work there.
Yeah, absolutely, and probably feel a lot more mentally healthy as well as a result of doing that amazing work and contributing. Yeah, I mean that connection between neurodivergence and intelligence services is a fascinating one. I was just checking. I recorded a podcast episode about that a while ago. It's episode 36, in case anybody feels like having a listen. And yeah, GCHQ featured in that. There was an article recently about dyslexics working at GCHQ, and GCHQ really been keen to get dyslexics in because they're they have a very, very different approach to looking at patterns, a much more broad view of patterns than for example, I have. I tend to zoom in on details, which is great, but it's not everything. Yeah, so they're really seeking out these different kinds of thinking.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating take when you think about it. If you consider your, I can't say the enemy, I don't know, another state, right? And you create a code, subconsciously you wouldn't realize you're doing it, but you're trying to create a code that's difficult to crack for somebody who thinks normally, right? That's kind of the idea. You want it to be something to be hard to understand how you break the code. So if you can get someone who thinks differently, they're obviously going to find it quite likely a lot easier to crack it. So it's one of those fascinating things you look at and think, well, when you've considered it, it's almost obvious, but we don't naturally think that there's that connection between somebody's neurodiverse but who'd be really good at stuff like that. But we find that more and more the places you look, right? Certain neurodiverse people are brilliant at just being able to do monotropism, which is focusing on one thing and becoming obsessed with it. And you find a lot of lawyers are like this because they're going to sit there and read big dusty old books for hours and hours on end. And so we found a correlation in that area well. And there's lots of industries where you find certain types of people work better in that way. And so there is value in recognizing this and then searching for people on purpose in that manner. Yeah,
for sure. But I think I just want to draw out something that's kind of in what you're saying, but just to make it really clear. I mean, that code is an example, right? That code, that unbreakable code that the intelligence services are searching for. Ideally, you'd have people with all kinds of different thinking styles, right? Not either dyslexic or neurotypical,
absolutely,
or autistic or neurotypical. You would have all of those different kinds of styles contributing to looking at a code and saying, yeah, can any of us break it, or is it equally difficult for all of us? And that's probably the best that we can do. So it's that combination of different styles, which is
so
the research shows, right, that is the combination.
100%. Yeah, and that leads us out of neurodiversity, though. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's what's so wonderful about this is suddenly you turn around and go, what would be the best team we could possibly get? And it would be people from different races, people from every age, obviously different sexes, different life experiences, upper class, lower class, all the different mix you could get would be the best possible way to have a team that would have the highest chance of success. And to be fair, that's been shown in psychology for decades and decades in almost every sphere of work, right? Not just in sort of code breaking. And it is really that case of we've sort of lost the understanding that the most successful teams are always the most diverse. And we tend to not build organizations that way. So there's just a staggering amount of potential that's currently unrealized. And I do apologize for interrupting you. I'm sorry about
that. No, it's okay. Please interrupt away. If it was indeed an interruption, it didn't feel like one. In fact, that is one of the reasons that people usually give for the importance of having diversity in organizations beyond the ethical reason. But it is a cognitive diversity which is most closely associated with problem solving, and actually not so much gender diversity or educational diversity or cultural diversity, all those things. They're also important maybe for other reasons, but purely for problem solving, if we generalize the code breaking to problem solving now, it really is the cognitive diversity that you need, but connected up. That's the trick. If you have lots of people with different thinking styles who can't work together, then they may as well not be there.
Right. And this is, I think, a critical point for when we're talking about the workplace. In the last sort of 20, 30 years, there's been a drive towards the empowerment and support of soft skills, right? Which is the ability of how you relate to each other and understand each other, right? And don't get me wrong, they're very important. I spent a large amount of my career teaching and facilitating them, so it's not a negative against them. But slightly separate to that is exactly what you're saying, the cognitive side of things. And what we would call that is the executive function, right? And autism and other neurodiverse types are very much about a slightly different executive function. So the ability for what your brain does and how it relates to yourself is different. And so you have a different experience, understanding of the world. So for me, yes, I have very strong autism and ADHD, but other things as well. So my visual memory and things don't exist, and I have amnesia and all that kind of fun stuff. But that's just because my brain is literally different, right? And I think that difference in executive function gives us all fascinating differences that we can all bring to the fore and achieve slightly different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's stick with this topic of connecting between different, people with different styles, different neuro styles, different cognitive styles, however we prefer to talk about them. Are there particular ways of connecting that are easier for autistic people, or if you prefer to start with the challenges, more challenging for autistic people? Then whichever one you don't answer first, I'll just ask you after.
Yes, okay. You're going to get me both ways no matter what. I love it. So what does that say about me? Whenever I answer, am I doing the easy one or the hard one first?
Which is the easy one or the hard one? I don't know.
I honestly do the same answer. I know that seems strange, but it's a bit like saying what's best in the workplace for women, right? It's quite a broad thing. It's a group of individuals that we use a term for, right? Yeah. But the range of experience is going to be vastly different. But also what we find, which is absolutely brilliant and so supporting, is that most of the things that help autistic or other neurodiverse types are the same things that help perfectly normal other people, right? And I don't mean normal that they're better or different or just neurotypical, we'll say. So for example, there's been, for the last 10 years, there's been a big push to say autistic people need noise cancelling headphones in the workplace. And that's been one of the big pushes to say that would help them focus and concentrate because they can get very easily distracted. And that's true. But if you've walked, well, anywhere in the world in the last 5 years, everyone's walking around with headphones. It's nothing to do with the makeup of your brain. People have just gotten used to being able to just shut out noise, right? I'm in London right now. If I walk up there, every single person has headphones, right? Whether it's the big over-ear ones or in-ear. And so a lot of the things that you would say, oh, these are helpful for an autistic person, are helpful for everybody. We all struggle when the office is really, really loud and really busy, And one of the good things here is we can create a level playing field for everyone, because once we stop saying what are the allowances that an autistic person needs, which is, it kind of singles them out. It's not very comfortable to turn around and go, please, I need help, right? Because that puts you at a disadvantage to everyone else. But if you just say everyone, anyone who wants can have headphones in the workplace, then you make the conversation easier for everyone. Everyone gets it. The autistic person doesn't feel weird because they're the only one to have their headphones. And so I think a lot of it is less about what does a neurodiverse person need, more about just how do we, for the general workforce, turn around and give them everyone what they need, right? And then make it more about individuality. And I think that the end goal for me would be to move away from the idea of an organizational culture, which is what companies strive for, right? We want to change our organizational culture, which isn't really true, other than, slapping a big bit of paper on the wall that says our values are, which the CEO has decided and we all pretend to be aligned with. But more cases saying the culture of this company is individually led. Individuals have their own values, and we as a company support their values. That's a better way to approach our organizations. And I think in that sense, by focusing on helping everyone, we lift each one up and we take away not any, but most of the stigma. Yeah,
no, I completely agree with that. Yeah, we've talked about that before. It was one of the things that struck me so strongly when I started working on this area, right, and applying some of the things that I was learning to help my autistic son at home, started messing around with him in the workplace, expecting one or two autistic people to say, thanks, Lisa, that's nice. And seeing that actually it helped everybody. And I didn't understand it at the time. I do understand it now. But I mean, that was what made me so excited, what made me keep going. I think your headphones example is a great one, right? I attended a launch of an employee resource group at a tech company a while ago, and one of the co-founders of the group was saying that she really needed to wear noise cancelling headphones in the open plan office. Like just she preferred to work at home. Right, coming to the office was a major onslaught for her.
Right.
And it wasn't only the audio; it was also just the visual and just the sense and the smells and everything. So noise cancelling headphones were pretty essential for her. She said, she said she still felt she got some strange looks, to be honest. So I think even in an organisation like that where there is reasonable awareness of neurodivergence and difference, there's still a bit of work to do about, why might noise cancelling headphones be handy, and it's not the end of the world, and okay, you don't want to have them on in a meeting, but if people are just working quiet at their desk, it really doesn't matter. There's another example that I learned there at that organisation, just to hammer home this point that things that will help an autistic person or otherwise neurodivergent person will help everybody. And there was also highlighted at the organisation that it could be incredibly overwhelming for people to go to the canteen and get their lunch. They offered a lunch service for everybody. Everybody had to go at the same time, and everybody could get their lunch. And the idea was that everybody would eat together in one room, and it was like one big room, so quite echoey, quite noisy, and everybody there all at the same time. Like you can imagine, it's quite an onslaught, especially for someone who doesn't really want to go to the office at all anyway, but just has to sometimes. So having kind of raised that, the canteen staff decided, well, if you let us know in advance, we'll put the lunch in a box and you can just take it with you, and eat it somewhere else quietly. I mean, that was great. And then other people were so happy about it because if they had a meeting with a customer or whatever, they could they wanted to prepare for a meeting, they could just quickly take their lunch with them and eat it. And there's still a good body of people who do get together socially in that area, which seems to be quite important to the company. But it's another example, and it's quite a small example, but it does make a big difference, actually.
Absolutely. I think it's about a variety of thought and approaches, right? We've gotten quite used to a sort of homogenous kind of thinking of we all need to be under the same roof and together and the same and alike, and different and bad and punished, right? And I think we need to grow up a little bit and be a bit more sensible about it. I was working with a client, and they were, this was not long after COVID. They were doing the whole, everyone's going to come back into the office, people can't work from home, etc. You always sit back and think, well, hold on a minute. They all worked from home for the last year or two, and in doing so, saved your company. Right? You wouldn't be here right now if they hadn't sat at their kitchen table and worked from there, and then all the C-levels who were on the top floor were coming from maybe 1.5 days a week, but yet we're demanding everyone had to come into the office. But you could go up to their level, most days was completely empty, other than secretaries who were there, or I guess admin assistants, I might say, were there, but they'd come in, but the bosses wouldn't. And the variety exists in the workplace. We just don't offer it across the entire organization. It's biased, right? And I think we need to get better at that side of things as well, about recognizing that difference is not bad, right? Difference can be very good. And indeed, when I'm talking about strategy to organizations, they're nearly always focusing on two things. One, we want to keep growing at 4% a year. And two, we want to find risks and destroy them. And I turn around and go, well, first of all, how do you know the risks aren't good things? Just because something changes from what you're doing today, that could be a really positive thing. Some of what you're doing right now could be really bad, right? They could be keeping you at that 3 or 4% growth a year, right? But then also thinking about your sort of strategy going forwards, why are you focused on that small, slow growth, right? That's not what's going to beat your competitors, right? Beating your competitors is going to be thinking differently, ideating differently, innovating, trying new things, some that fail, but some that work. And all that's going to come from different people with different ideas and allowing that variety. And I think there's a sort of fear in some companies about that change. And it's a sort of a looking back to the past and, well, this has always worked. That may be true, but in the world of AI and the internet and globalization, it's not where we were in 1790, so we can't go back to the Industrial Revolution and keep
and
working the
as
same
we
way.
talked about last time, right, with the very different expectations of Gen Z coming through, 53% of whom identify as neurodivergent, so no longer in the minority, and neurotypical are in the minority. And yeah, you can't escape this variety. And I think you mentioned in that last comment that in some places in an organization you do find teams that welcome variety, and in some places people seem to think it's scary, right? And basically the variety is biased. The attitude to variety is biased, and I think it's biased just depending on probably the background, the experiences, that maybe the openness of whichever leader happens to be in that part of the organization. It might be leader of one team, just like 5 people or 10 people. It might be leader of a department, it might be leader of a whole organization, you know, whatever level we're talking about. I don't really care. And I think that can be a good use of the, you know, the values that are stuck on the wall behind you. To say that, you know, we value variety, that could be a useful value, I think, which is put in place by leadership. And then, you know, what that actually means in each particular team or department or whatever, that could be different, and how it's enabled could be different. But the fact that we value variety and we want variety, that's not negotiable. I think that will be a useful way to approach values beyond just the CEO feeling good about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. The aim for any leader shouldn't be to create followers. It should be to create leaders, right? I mean, that's what organizations should be focused on building, and that's not as common as we'd like it to be. It's more focused on building followers normally. And I think it's a strange concept. If you do the sort of 5-year-old child test, which is always great, a 5-year-old child who's completely innocent, and you know, they don't know anything yet, so they're just completely honest in what they say. They're not coloured by reality. You sit down with a 5-year-old and say, if you have a company of 20,000 people, would you expect them all to be the same? They'd obviously go, well, no, of course not. There's 20,000 different people. There's going to be lots of variety. There's the average CEO is saying they must all be alike. They must all work the same. They must all come into us. They must all sit their desks. They must all follow these rules. And you look at it and go, you're putting in so much structure and process. You're strangling the organization that you're trying to save. And I see that over and over and over again when I go into companies, and you know, that is what I do for a living. And your point about variety, I mean, that's why we built Neuro, right? That's exactly what we're trying to do, is to say to organizations, don't look at neurodiverse people as something that need to fit in, or you need to make allowances for, which is, you know, what the law makes you do. I get that. But if you look at that variety and say, no, this is positive to us, you flip that argument, you reframe your thinking around it, you'll start building psychological safety for your entire organization, because they'll all start going, well, I can be me, I can do what I do. And that's a very positive thing. There is one of the biggest costs for all companies is the attrition rate to their staff. Rehiring people is so expensive. Well, if you build a place that's psychologically safe for your people, that they feel happy in, that they don't want to go and work somewhere else, well, then you've got loyalty. And your entire strategy is based upon loyalty. Anything you want to achieve over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, it's assuming your people are still there. Right?
And your growth, and you're minimizing risk, and
exactly.
And you need to keep your talent. And not only do people want to stay, then I think in those circumstances, that's when people give their best. Right? People so value a workplace where they are valued themselves, regardless of what kind of value they're contributing, and where they're enabled to contribute it, and they just want to contribute. And the research shows very, very, very clear correlations between the extent of employee engagement and all, you know, whether it's productivity or customer satisfaction or low error rates in product, you know, whatever metric you look at, pretty much they all correlate very strongly with increased engagement. I mean, that you talked about process and how over engineering processes was strangling a lot of the diversity in the way that people think, and I yeah, I wonder, does that just come from fear, do you think? Does it come from a fear of making a mistake? Does it come from that fear of taking a risk and having something go wrong? That people are just trying to control everything?
Yes, for sure. I've met lots and lots of leaders over my career, and most of them are afraid. It's a scary place to be at the top, and all the responsibilities on you. I get it. There's lots of money and kudos, and we all can look and go, we'd like some of that. I accept that. I'm not being 100% sympathetic to their cause, but I do recognize that at the top, when you make decisions, they could be quite costly. There's a lot of pressure on you, right?
Yeah.
So there certainly is that fear. There's also well, if I'm here for 3 years, I'll get my golden parachute, lots of money. So why take the risk? Why change anything, right? But I think the biggest, most overriding thing is culture. Nearly every company is kind of the same in that way. So why would you be the leader that's brave enough to look at millions of other companies around the world and go, we're going to be different to that? That's not the sensible thing to do. The sensible thing to do is to keep doing what everyone else is doing. But of course, conversely, if you are willing to take that risk, you could well become way more successful, right? Because exactly what you and I have just been discussing. But I think culturally, it's a difficult realization to take in. And that's why we're approaching it the way we're doing it, which is to shift that around and say, let's make your workplace more attractive so you can make these kinds of difficult decisions, right? That's why the neuro accreditation is based upon them being comfortable to make those changes, to invest in those changes. And then they can show themselves being more attractive to employees, clients, suppliers, et cetera, because I think we've got to meet businesses and business owners where they are. You can't just turn around and say, for moral and ethical reasons, you should do this. They're there to make money. It's a capitalist business, right? And so I think it's taking the understanding of neurodiversity and the variety and shifting it into a business focus as something that they can see as a useful strategy, not just that moral ethical piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to dismiss people who don't see things that you and I can see very clearly, and we think are no-brainers, or don't want to try, or are risk averse, or it's easy to dismiss it and just say that's stupid, or it's just silly, or come and get with the times. But it's real. And most leaders in most organizations at whatever level of leadership they're at, that most leaders think like that.
Well, also
we have to take it seriously and address it. So it's a serious concern if we want to make
absolutely, of course it is. And the most important point here is, of course, if we just dismiss their concerns and think, well, that's just you being silly, that's no different to them doing it to neurodiverse people.
Exactly.
Right. So I mean, we'd be kind of acting like them if we did that. So we have to be more empathetic, more understanding of their situation. I think that's absolutely critical. Otherwise, it's a standoff. Right? It's definitely about, as I said, meeting people where they are, and then helping them understand, and then going on the journey with them. And hopefully that path, that way, leads to more success. Yeah,
definitely. We've talked about organizations like, a unit, the whole organization until now. Either they are doing this or they're not. They are becoming more neuro-inclusive or they're not. But I've got an organization isn't usually one amorphous unit. It's usually got some organization and structure in it.
For sure.
Do you find that the senior leadership is also risk averse in the sense that they don't want to try out at building neuro-inclusion in a small unit of their organization, maybe just a team or a small department or whatever? Is that something that they're willing to go for?
I'm finding more and more they're willing to try it. We've had a staggering amount of success in the last month or two. It's just mind-blowing, to be honest with you. Of organizations either reaching out to us, or when we talk to them, they're really interested. It does feel like there's, I don't know, something's shifting. I don't know if it's because of what's happening in the US and it's making people look at it more and actually think about it, or if it's just, I don't know, I hope maybe it's just time. I don't know. But organizations are definitely open to it. They really are. And I think we can make a strong enough business case that even if they're struggling, we can help them understand why they should at least pilot it or try it right?
Yeah.
And if we can't, well, that's our fault, right?
Yeah.
We need to meet them where they are. But and the best I can give you is, yes, the responses we're getting back are, we're interested, we want to do more of this.
Yeah.
So I'm at least hopeful.
Yeah, great. And you know, when we started off this discussion, I talked about some functions that seem to be a very obvious fit with autism, then at that time with autistic skills. Let's say, I mean, tech. I mentioned Silicon Valley as well,
Right.
as object during this conversation. Tech is a very good match with typical autistic skills. I'll say that every autistic person works in tech, but it's a good match with typical skills.
Yeah.
And while we've been talking, you've also mentioned legal profession, right? That you get a lot of maybe autistic people who can focus very, very deeply for a very long time on those dry legal documents. So they're very interesting to some people, but not especially to me.
Right.
But the legal profession isn't a profession you would automatically think of as one that is a natural fit for autistic people. So we've got two very different professions there, right? Tech, very rapidly moving, AI is there, quick, innovate. Legal, much more conservative, much more regulated, much more structured, very different. Do you think anything that we've been talking about up until now in this podcast is different for these two, let's say, polar opposite functions? Or would you say that what we've been talking about applies?
I would say it all applies, but I think it shows the variety within neurodiversity, right? I mean, it's huge differences. I mean, I'm reminded of the conversation you and I had earlier about reading materials. I mean, I'll maybe grab it just to make the point visual.
Yeah, we were talking about holiday reading.
Exactly. So,
My goodness,
so this is the DSM-5. So this is an American book that defines all of the problems in my head, effectively. But no, it's all the mental disorders.
And many more, right? It's not
no,
all
I've got all of these. No, but it's 1,000 pages.
Wow.
So it's very, very thin paper. But this is the kind of thing that I would take away, no jokes, on a holiday and spend days reading, right?
Yeah.
There's my wife, who's also neurodiverse. That would be her worst nightmare, right? She wants to lie in the sun and get a tan and all the things I really don't want to do. And I think it's a silly point, but neurodiversity literally describes diversity, right? It's not about a type or we're all the same. In the same way that neurotypicals are all very, very different, and there's lots of variety and all the different jobs out there they do, right? It's not not trying to be different in that sense. And I think it's just, we should, as I said, be valuing individuals by the skills that they have, right? There's doctors out there who are very, very neurodiverse, and it makes them amazing surgeons and things like that. I met recently with a large group of entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are very, very highly likely to be neurodiverse. There's a reason I am an entrepreneur, because I just don't fit very well in the standard workplace. I'm just not a good fit for it. And a lot of entrepreneurs tried out and found the same thing. Most famous one being sort of the Richard Bransons or the Elon Musks of this world, right? So yeah, I think it's a case of just saying there's a huge spectrum of difference, but everyone's got something to offer, and it's about leaders and organizations looking at people and going, how do we build the right environment that is attractive to individuals? Not that we build one that everyone has to fit into the same, round peg into a round hole type logic, but everyone's different. If we value those differences, we'll get lots of different outcomes, which would be brilliant. That would give us so much potential. And I think it's thinking a bit more about what we're trying to build as leaders, as organizations, as people.
I think that's a good place to leave it, actually. That's a really, really good closing thought. Valuing the individual skills that people have, whether those people are neurodivergent or neurotypical, whether they know they're neurodivergent or not, if they are. How can organizations, whichever function they're in, tech, legal, whatever, we don't care, how can they make a culture that enables people working there to enable all of that diversity that you want to attract?
Yeah, and I think
that
that's
we can get the outcomes that are just waiting if organisations can put that in place.
there's so much
much more than 4% growth and all of that wonderful engagement. And
yeah. I mean, there's so much latent potential there, isn't there? That's just sort of being missed. And certainly, you know, that's what we're trying to do. So if anyone watching is looking for that, reach out to us at neurocharity.org, and we do training, assessments, and then accreditation once you've achieved a certain amount of change in your organization to really show that you are valuing organizations in that way. And we're doing it because it's important. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's ethically what we think needs to be done. So yeah, come and join us on the journey. Tell us what we're doing wrong and support us, and let's see if we can change the world.
Right. Yeah, it's ethical, and by the way, it's really, really good for your business. So double tick. I'll put those details, Robert, that you shared in the notes for the episode as well. In case you want to find them there. But I will say thank you once again for joining me on the podcast, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that podcast as much as I enjoyed recording it with Robert. It's always high energy and thought-provoking and just basically interesting to talk to Robert. If the core point that he was making about really making sure that we are all set up in our teams, in our departments, in our organizations to value individuals and all of the different skills that they bring, regardless of their cognitive style, whether that's an autistic style, an ADHD style, a dyslexic style, neurotypical style, we don't care. We just love the diversity. So if that resonated, the need to value that diversity, then please do share this episode link on with one of your friends, one of your connections, one of your colleagues. So the more that we can all do to build awareness, to open people's minds to the value of cognitive diversity as a benefit and not as something to fear, that's only going to help us to build the neuro-inclusive culture that Robert and I and others are striving for. Now, if you're interested in having a thought partner to better set up your team working norms, your processes in a way that doesn't stifle but enables, and so on. If you're interested in exploring that for your team, maybe you think you have an autistic team member or an ADHD team member, or you have somebody who thinks very differently, you're not sure how to integrate them properly into the team, feel free to set up a consultation with me, completely free. We'll talk about what you're experiencing. We'll make a start on uncovering symptoms, and we will have a discussion about what building a neuro-inspired team culture could mean for your engagement and performance of your team members. There's absolutely no obligation, so we could decide to go further, or you could decide to go it alone and take the value that you have gained from that consultation. You can easily find the link on my website, but I'll also put the link in the episode notes. I look forward to hearing from you and meeting you soon. But otherwise, I'll say again, thanks very much for listening.